Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the series, Does Evolution Make Sense? This is Module 3. We're going to look at a scientific model that shows evolution has an energy crisis. Let's get started. We have a fairly packed agenda today. So I've added 2 appendices, which you may or may not need, but I've added them for completeness. First, we're going to do a quick recap of what we've found up till now in Module 1 and Module 2. We're going to talk about what our obligation is, because we do have an obligation as a result of learning all this information. We're going to talk about our observations about energy, because this particular topic is about energy, so we need to set the groundwork. We're going to look into what is the energy gap between chemicals and life. In particular, at one point, you could say there were just chemicals floating around. And then in the next instant, all those chemicals had somehow become a cell, life. We're going to explore, under the most favorable conditions, how likely are those dead chemicals going to become a cell. Now, part of this is going to be interpreting the data or interpreting the prediction. And so that's what the section, how can we understand this, is about. It's not only getting a number, it's understanding what that number means in reality. Then we're going to briefly touch on what you should take away from all of this, and then wrap up with the summary. As mentioned, there are 2 appendices. There's what I call a probability primer. If you haven't taken probability theory, or if you did and it was a long time ago, this is just a very quick reminder of some of the core concepts behind probability. All you need is basic math and algebra to understand this. And Appendix 3B, we list the assumptions of the scientific model that are used. And the reason for that is I think these are all just valid assumptions. In some sense, they're plainly obvious. And so it's not needed in the sense of for the core of the argument. What I'm trying to do is to present the argument, and then you can go and dig into it. First, the disclaimer, don't shoot the messenger. I am not against science. Science pays my bills. We're going to present some negative illustrations about science, and the reason for that is our culture has these romantic opinions of science. You know, science is going to solve global peace and world hunger. Science is the answer to everything. Well, that's a romantic opinion. It is not the truth, but we need to balance this out. So we present some negative illustrations. I do want to warn you that you may respond emotionally to this material. This has happened to me in the past, especially if you work in a scientific field or a university. You may feel I'm attacking your way of looking at the world, and I'm not intending to do that. I'm just trying to present some material. So I'd ask that you reflect on why are you having this response. And just to point out here, your negative emotions don't mean that what I'm presenting is untrue. So why should you listen to me? Just briefly recapping, a PhD in electrical engineering. I published in international refereed scientific journals and conferences. I have crossed domains. I published in the engineering realm, in the biology realm, and in the philosophical realm. So I have navigated each of these different disciplines to some degree. I have taught university. I currently work in high tech. In particular, I am a member of several Christian apologist organizations, and I mentored university students to learn critical thinking skills. We are going to sharpen those critical thinking skills here, so you will benefit from this as well. Just to recap the agenda in Module 1, why does evolution feel confusing? First question we addressed is how do we define evolution? We showed there are 8 definitions. There may be more, but 8 are sufficient. In particular, undirected macroevolution is the default discussion around evolution or how dead chemicals became cellular life. So we asked, why do smart people believe in undirected macroevolution? We pointed out there are many non-scientific reasons. There may be bias, there may be career, jeopardy, etc., etc. We also said, is there a religious component to evolution in section 1.3? And yes, there is. We also had to come up with how can we detect nonsense, because there's some nonsense that's floating around here, and we came up with the nonsense detector, which we're going to use in this presentation as well. Just a recap of what is undirected macroevolution. undirected macroevolution, we have the equation here. It is chance mutation along with chance selection and time. That's the equation. In particular, its definition leaves no room for God or intelligent intervention. It's chance all the way down. Now, this goes against our common experience. This is why I think it needs to be examined. That anything that mutates things by chance or selects things by chance, it makes things break down. It goes against our common experience to say that this will result in complex things becoming more complex by chance events. Instead, again, we see complex things break down over time. In the picture you'll see on the left, there's a spanky new robot factory manufacturing cars. On the right, you see a dingy, old, rusty robot manufacturing cars. Evolution says that things are supposed to move from right to left, from the dingy, rusty, old to the more complex on the left. We know in real life that things actually move from the left to the right, that things degrade over time, and we never observe an exception to this common experience. If you want to know more, I suggest you go back to section 1.1 and review that content. We also need to talk about what we call religious evolution here. We recognize that scientists are human. Humans make mistakes, humans have biases, and so sometimes scientists make claims that are not scientific. They overreach or they exaggerate, they claim things that don't have evidence, but they wish them to be true. In particular, they can have these claims address religious questions. In section 1.3, we pointed out that undirected macroevolution can act as the creation story of atheism. Christianity has Genesis 1 as its creation story for man. Atheism has undirected macroevolution as its creation story for man. So evolution as religion is when a scientist makes religious claims using evolutionary language or concepts. I would suggest you go to section 1.3 to review that content if you have any questions. In section 2.4, which is in module 2, we found that the first cell is more complex than a space station. On the picture on the left, you see it's complex. On the right, it's absolutely more complex. Now, here's a question for you. If we don't believe a space station can form from random space dust, why think a complex cell can form from random chemical reactions? If you have any questions about this, I would suggest you go to section 2.4 to review the content there.